all week long. And in much of the broadcast, the conversation was around BYU star freshman, future top whatever pick AJ Dybantsa. But Houston goes in and wins anyway on the backs of their own pair of freshman phenoms.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by, there might be a few of those tonight, but thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the post game, first listen the next morning. Although technically this game starts so late, it kind of is the next morning. Whatever the case may be, you're making the Locked On Sports Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network out there, and thank you for that. If you enjoyed the conversation down below, it looks like there's something going on already talking about this game. But tell us if you've ever had a Cougar tail, because the Houston Cougars took that Cougar tail. See what I did there? 77-66 in Provo, Utah, over those BYU Blue Cougars. I want to talk in this game about the freshmen, and that's the storyline here at the start. I want to talk about being tougher and just more physical and imposing your will on an opponent in a contact sport like basketball is. We'll give out some nightcaps at the end as well. Tip of the cap, nightcap kind of moments. But the story all week in this one was AJ Dybantsa versus this Houston defense, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of conversation about the fact that he had 28 points and he did this and he did that, but Chris Cenac came out with a purpose, a real mission in this game. He finished with 16 points in 29 minutes, got limited on some foul trouble there at some points in the second half, but he really took, he took this very personally. They mentioned in the broadcast that Sennac and Dybantsa knew each other, and I think that really undersells their relationship. I don't mean to make it sound like it's adversarial, but they're very similar possessions, very similar prototypes. Both went to prep schools, right? Sennac went to Link. Dybantsa pretty famously went to Utah Prep. He suddenly went to Utah Prep right before he committed to BYU, and he may be a member of the Utah Jazz soon. That's all kind of odd. Anyway, Sennac, Link, Utah Prep for Dybantsa. Dybantsa makes Team USA, and Cenac famously did not make that final cut at the start of last summer for the U19 or whatever team it was. And I think it's fair to say that Cenac is taking that personally against these other freshmen. You saw Sebastian Williams-Adams in Auburn when he did that against that other freshman forward. He's doing it tonight, I guess technically this morning, against AJ Dybantsa as well. Cenac had the first 7 points of the game, dunk, a three, looked like he was on a real mission. He had 12 points in the 15 minutes he got to play in the first half. And frankly, it felt like he was on an even bigger tear than that. Now, the second half, as we've seen out of him a couple times, the offense slowed down a little bit. But man, oh man, I feel like that set the tone for a lot of other things. He opened the game as the killer and went at Dybantsa full force. And frankly, I think, and I was texting back and forth, I'm trying to have, if you haven't seen Locked On Podcast Network, I brought in the No Ceilings crew, and I'm trying to work with a couple. I'm texting some of them throughout most of these games about Houston's guys, but talking about like draft prospects and whatever. And one of them was going back and forth with me a little bit about like how high Chris Cenac is climbing in the last month of these NBA draft boards. He'd start off a top 10 guy. He kind of got dropped back to like the top end of the first round, maybe start the second round. He's clearly worked his way back up into that lottery. How high can he really go with all these big forwards in this class? Anyway, I said to say that he had the kind of night tonight that looked like a top 10 pick once again. He also, I think it should be pointed out, had 5 rebounds, but he had a handful of tip out kind of plays Houston makes as well. A big block, a big steal. Really strong performance from Chris Cenac. The closer is Kingston Flemings and will be Kingston Flemings until noted otherwise. He had 19 points in this one, but did not shoot the 3 ball well and did not, frankly, shoot the ball well at all to open this game. But it was very clear that when it was time to make a play down the stretch, they trusted Kingston with it. They attacked the rim with it. It was his turn to do it. Now, it doesn't mean like Khalifa Sacco didn't get a nice putback or, a missed Fleming shot didn't turn into something else or whatever. But the offense was intended to go through Kingston, and it worked that way. Other things all spun out of that, right? More things happened out of that, but Kingston took over the pace of this game on a floor on the road where all the talk was about this other freshman who had a very good game. I don't mean to say he didn't, but man, put some respect on Kingston's name. He earns it time and time again. Uh, I think the ESPN thing had him as a 5th pick overall. Look, Peterson's great. We'll see him live in person soon with the Kansas Houston matchup. It's in the middle of a gauntlet Houston's got in it's just 10 days now or something like that. Sure, all that's very, very true. Flemings wins games for the Cougs, and they are 21-2. Some guys play winning basketball. Some guys play 35 minutes a night. It's important to do those kinds of things, right? Now, Kingston did a great job, I thought, in this one. And we should point out, like, yes, AJ Dybantsa did have his 28 points, did take over the game in moments. I think that the first takeover of those moments started when Cenac went out with 2 fouls in the first half. I think that was a big, gain. He got a couple baskets pretty quickly after that moment. And basketball's just got this weird thing. I can't quantify it, but once you see the ball go in, it starts to go in more often. And so once Bonsa had those first couple, it felt like he kind of started rolling after that. I do think that coincided, the start of that it is, with Sennac going out with foul trouble. So I think that got him going, and he got moving after that. He got busy from 3, got to the rim. He did a lot of great things. He also shot 12 free throws, which is remarkable because Houston as a team shot 15. The free throw discrepancy in this game, we'll talk about it later. The free throw discrepancy in this game was crazy. Houston shot almost half as many free throws, and BYU was intentionally fouling in the final 3 minutes of the game. Just a crazy, crazy discrepancy in that. But anyway, other freshmen I would point out, Isaiah Harwell, I thought played pretty tough physical minutes. In his 8 minutes, he rolled an ankle and did not come back in the game. I saw some people speculate on Twitter if that meant it was bad or not. I don't think it was, and watching the play happen on the TV, there's the replay twice. I think what that really showed more of was Harwell went out with that ankle injury. Honestly, Kingston did not seem to go out again. Emmanuel Sharp did not seem to go out again. Ramon Walker came in and played pretty well. Khalifa Sacco came in and played pretty well. I think this was really more about the other guys were not going to come off the floor. I don't know if Harwell would have gotten in or not. I'm sure we'll find more out about that injury as things go on, but he also played a pretty impactful 8 minutes while he was able to, I thought. Had his own 3, came in right away and knocked one down. And there you go. Freshman led the way, though, with the Kingston Flemings 19, the Cenac 16. Emmanuel Sharp had his own 14, kind of the other end of the spectrum, the veteran of sorts. And really, Houston shot the ball very mundane numbers from behind the arc. Houston shot the ball well from the free throw line, but didn't get there a whole heck of a lot. I blame that more on whistles than attacks, but whatever. Really average game in terms of shooting percentages and things like that. I thought they got good looks and made normal percentages of them. They won this game, to me, as an offensive rebounding team. Houston had 13 offensive rebounds in this matchup. Really controlled the glass a lot in the second half of the basketball game and won the rebounding battle overall 40-36. And that, I think, is just because Sampson teams will always be tougher than Kevin Young teams. There's just a different style of basketball. I want to get to that in just 1 second and kind of talk about how this is playing out each and every time. But before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, because right now the winter games are here. Opening ceremonies or Friday night. There were games before that, actually. If you're anything like us, you're locking into events and see what the biggest stage looks like every 4 years. And that's why the winter games on FanDuel just make more sense. From medal counts to individual events, finding your angle on the sports that you care about the most or the ones you're learning about in the moment, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action, drama, those curling matches, those hockey games, even like niche events like, that figure skating this or that dance competition that. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them up with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Parker Ainsworth, Locked on Cougs here. Thank you for being Locked on Cougs, your first listen to the post-game first listen next morning, or anywhere in between. And being Locked On Sports Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network out there. If you haven't checked out the Everydayer Club, you would enjoy it if you just like a little bit more Locked On Cougs in your life each and every day. Access to ad-free audio. The members only Discord server. Might talk some trash in there to those BYU folks. You should join me. All access episodes of Locked On Cougs come out one-on-one texting with me. There's some questions we're going to get to in a second. But all kinds of a merch store, the discount, all kinds of fun new ways to get into Locked On. If you just want a little bit more, go to lockedoncougs.supercast.com to learn more about the program. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer. Now, speaking of everydayers, had a few questions, and I want to get into those. I want to talk some about Houston and their toughness. I got people flying in the chat here. If we have time for that, we will get to that too. I want to give some preferences, some shout outs. I don't ever call out names in these. Maybe I should. But the everydayers chime in with the texting me during the games. There's a lot of fun. And they get questions like this. Like, when do we worry about Milos? Now, this came late in the game. I believe after Milos missed a free throw in the final few minutes there. Milos finished with 8 points. He did have 5 assists. I don't believe he had a turnover. Did he have, no, they have him down with 1 turnover and 3 rebounds. I also feel like it's worth pointing out that he was largely covering Rob Wright until they had to switch him to Richie Saunders, and then Rob Wright got hot. I think there was some direct correlation to that, if being really honest. But Miles shot 2 of 10, and 2 of 3 behind the arc is great, but 2 of 10 from the field is not. I still feel like we're seeing a very hesitant, odd, awkward Milos at times, and I think that that's just where we're at now. Last year he had adjusted by this point. I think people are remembering late February and March Milos. And I think that if we remember last season, like, there were people that were going to call the season, throw it in the can in like December. I think that it's normal to watch a guy grow into a new role. I will say that there were moments in this game that I was like, that sucks, right? Like, yeah, he attacked the rim, and I think he was unsure of it. There was like a floater / lob pass moment. And he could have had the lob to Sacco, or he could have shot the floater and let Sacco get the rebound. I think Sacco thought he was getting a lob, and I think Milos was kind of undecided, and then eventually shot the floater, and that ultimately missed. I think the undecidedness on the way up made it miss. But Alan Train here points out we're not done and checking out on Milos as well. I think he plays a very important role. I also think it's hard to quantify the role he plays defensively as a 6'4" with long wingspan perimeter guy. But I think he's, especially as a guy that's been in the program for over a year now, I think he's a really big defensive impact as well. I also think there's been several times where even if the offense does not result in him getting a shot, you see him calm things down before getting the ball to Kingston and getting things moving. He's got a good presence on the floor. And frankly, I think people typically say, like, you want Mercy here, you want Mercy there, and Mercy is a great offensive weapon for this team. Mercy Miller, that is. Tonight he only got 4 minutes because you had offense coming from elsewhere and didn't need the Mercy Miller offense. I think Milos brings a lot of, frankly, if you could combine those two players, Mercy and Milos, you have a really, like, first-round draft pick kind of basketball player. I think Milos brings a lot of those other things. So when you don't need Mercy scoring, I think Milos continues to get those minutes. Now, this was not the only question we got. We got a couple others here. I want to jump into them. Second one, are we sure BYU isn't really just one? So I actually put this one because I thought that was really funny. Are we sure BYU isn't really just one good player and they actually suck? I don't think that's the case. BYU has now lost 4 games in a row in conference play, including Oklahoma State last, Wednesday. And we saw Oklahoma State got like doubled up by Arizona today. Crazy score to see. I think that, to me, speaks more to a team that relies so heavily on a freshman. And it's interesting because, like, in scouting this game coming into it, look, I think AJ Dybantsa is really, really good, and I hope that didn't get underscored by me kind of ragging on him in the first segment a little bit. He is their offense. It is his scoring shine. It is his assist. It is his hockey assist. It is his gravity. It is his everything. And I think when you play teams like a well-coached, Lutz is a good coach at Oklahoma State. They just haven't built it up there yet. And when you see that kind of road game, I think that's when freshmen will struggle to make those decisions, right? I also think it's worth pointing out that, like, Rob Wright was hot tonight. Richie Saunders was not. They kind of need all three to spread their offense out because the way they play. And then ultimately, and I kind of alluded to this in the first segment, we'll get to it now. I just don't. I think so. Here's what I think about Kevin Young. I think Kevin Young is a great offensive basketball coach. I think Kevin Young knows what he's looking for in basketball players. And I don't want to say this next part is a way that like disparages any of that. Kelvin Sampson said when he came to Houston that he's going to coach the defense. He's got to find guys that can score on their own because he's going to be a defensive-minded coach. And we've seen that with like Marcus Sasser isolation plays. Jarris Walker was a great stretch for. We can go back to Quentin Grimes. You can go back to Ladiki. Like they've all Rob Gray. You've seen Houston always gets guards that find ways to score because Sampson's going to coach the defense, right? That's what he does. I think Kevin Young is almost the opposite. I think Kevin Young's got to find guys that are that Kada guy that are just raw and they're like dogs on defense. And they're like, I think he's got to go find some of those guys and coach up their offense because right now he's clearly having trouble matching physicality. Like Kada was a little bit out of himself. And Houston won a lot of possessions in this game and a lot of loose balls, a lot of 50-50 balls in this game by just being more physical and by being more aggressive and being more on the ball and just being a little bit more like having that more oomph to it, right? And look, again, I think that's as a coach, you got to know what you can do and what you can't. We got to recruit instead in the same way that Sampson goes out and get those offensive guys in the inverse in BYU because they clearly they've got talent and they get beat up. This is 4 games in a row. They've been out physicaled. And just kind of outmanned in a toughness way. And this was a game they've had circled on their calendar for months. This was, I mean, Houston, after winning the conference 2 years in a row, beat them up a lot last year, kind of spoiled their season in a lot of ways last year in the conference tournament. Houston is a team that BYU wanted. I can tell you right now, talk to Jake Hatch. I've locked on BYU Cougars, talk to people in Provo. Locked on got a lot of love in Provo, right? And if you're one of those folks here, I don't mean, again, this is about fixing your program. It's not like I think Young's a great offensive coach, but man, like physically speaking, he's got to go find some guys that have that naturally because Houston's going to keep winning these matchups if they keep out physicaling BYU, right? I don't think BYU has other problems. I think that's just a big enough problem when you're playing Houston that you're not going to win that game. Now, I didn't know that I had Houston winning by 11 points. I thought it was going to be like a 5-point game, 5-point win on the road or something like that, right? I think that was my prediction the other day. But I'll take the 11, right? I'll take the 11. Now, the other question I had come in here was question about foul trouble. Foul trouble again, freaking A. And I might have censored that one because this is a family-friendly show. Mostly, I think what happened here was Houston and the foul trouble and the whistles were fascinating. There were at least 5 free throws Houston got at the end where BYU was trying to foul to play the possessions game. And so Houston goes 12 of 15 on the whole game, right? But really could have been more like 7 of 10, right? BYU shot 28 free throws. Now, they only made 16 because guys like Kada, guys like Mboop or whatever the guy's name, like they had guys at the free throw line that did not need to be there. Dybantsa himself was 7 of 12. He's a freshman, but he's 7 of 12, right? But they got almost twice as many. And BYU was having multiple possessions of trying to get 2 fouls, get the ball, 2 free throws, get the ball back. And I feel like ultimately some of that is home cooking. I feel like the TV guys were really odd. I said this on Twitter, so I don't mean like repeat takes, but it felt like the TV guys were giving the refs a lot of praise for getting hard calls right, but giving almost no criticism for getting easy calls wrong. There was one play that Kingston shot a layup. They got goaltended 3 times. And I was like, that should be worth 6 points. I mean, it was the guy hit through the net, through the rim, hit the rim, and the ball was on the way down because Kingston was above the rim throwing it down. And they just called it a block out of bounds. That should have been 6 points. Anyway, so that happened. Wouldn't actually be 6 points. I know, right? But that happened. There was another one where it went out of bounds off a BYU leg that was very clearly off of a BYU leg. It hit a BYU guy that was standing out of bounds. And they had to go. I mean, Houston had to challenge it to get the ball back there. There were jump balls that probably should have been BYU fouls, and then frankly, fouls that probably should have just been jump balls. There were all kinds of like easy calls I felt like that went wrong. They got 2 or 3 hard ones right, and I got to think they got a lot of credit from that. Foul comes in the free throw. Houston will always shoot in a competitive game less free throws than the opponent. Houston's defense will always commit more fouls than the opponent. I'm not necessarily worried when that's the case. It's when the gap is so wide, right? That's the big thing to me, and that's the big problem there. I do have a second. I'll go through here, see what other comments we got here. Got a lot of people in the chat tonight, so thank you for tuning in live. We're live after basically every game, so make sure you subscribe to the bell so you know when things go live. Lots of Cougs rather than Cougs kind of comments like these. Gotta love those. Gotta love those. Let's make new thing in the chat. Hey chat. If you were to make this a rivalry, and that's going to my third segment here. Spoiler. If you were to make this a rivalry, what would you call it? Would you call it the cat fight? I think, but you have something better than that? Let me know. Tell me in the comments down below. Now, I feel like, well, the hat came from Buc-ee's for the folks at home, and that's very clear. They had some Buc-ee's. Now, people talking about this, these kinds of things here. Mercy Miller, talking about Keita. Someone from Arizona's here. I like this one. Cougs with red dots defeated Cougs with blue dot. All kinds of fun stuff there. Now, I want to get to the third segment, talking some Nightcaps, talk about this rivalry. That could be a fun one. And how we turn it into one, and all that in just one second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Wayfair. Now, Wayfair is a new year. It's all here. Perfect time to reset your routine as we're moving into spring and do all of those kinds of things. Spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks. And we all have the snow days and got like iced in. You got to see your house up close and personal. And now you just want a little bit of a refresh, spruce up this, spruce up that. And Wayfair is here to help, from bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room. Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair is everything you need for a full home refresh, all in one place. Look, I've been living in my house about a year and a half, and that's about the time we start finding new accent this or throw that. And I got to say, every time I need one of those, that Wayfair is the place to get it. Get organized, refresh, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Indeed, because hiring is not just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business and move forward. If you're going to find candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs are the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you find a quality candidate, match with, and then find a quality candidate by boosting your job listing to people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, different locations. That's what I like about Indeed, though. You can be very, very specific and target exactly what you need. With sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. Here's a stat that may say it all. In the single minute I've been talking to you about it, companies like yours have hired 27 different times on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates. Check all the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get the job in your premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Parker Ainsworth locked on Cougs. I want to give some nightcaps to the nightcap, whatever kind of nightcap you want to go with. And I have to say, I want to give one nightcap that I don't typically give. And that's to the four-letter network that made this a primetime rivalry Saturday kind of game. This Saturday, you had Carolina Duke, you had Alabama Auburn, Tennessee Kentucky, Houston BYU. Now, I know Houston and BYU are not like the most strictest of rivalry since, right? I know that they're not like, there's the Tech and the Houston hate. I don't know if BYU hates anyone besides Utah, if I'm being really honest. That just doesn't seem to be their MO. I like they're really strong on offense. Houston's really strong on defense. I like that both coaches spend a little bit of time in the pros. Obviously, Kelvin had his time in college before that, but I think that's important too. I think the big deal here to me is that both of these teams came into the conference at the same time, and both these teams have a lot of similarity. Both these programs have a lot of similarities as they're crawling out of that G5 status to being very quickly competitive. Houston won 10 games last year in football. BYU's broken double digits the previous the 2 seasons, I guess, last one the year before. Houston, I think, is obviously dominant conference in basketball. BYU has shot up the charts in basketball very quickly. I think there's something to be said about in these revenue sports specifically, Houston, BYU having similar Big 12 resumes. I also think that the Cougars thing is simply put fun. There's other ways to do that, but I think that's a fun thing and aspect of this. We wear red, they wear blue. That makes for nice aesthetics. Sure. I also think it's worth pointing out, like, Houston, public school in the city, BYU, private school, 40 minutes outside of town, in the mountains, in the bayou. Like, these are very different vibes. I think there's something there. Longtime listeners of the show know I love building a rivalry. I think Houston needs rivalries. I think college sports thrive on rivalries. And I do think for Houston to have those, you got to kind of like spark them. I think nights like this more often might do those kinds of things. So shouts to the 4 Network. I don't know if I say them or not, though, for putting Houston BYU on that slate and putting in prime time. 9:30 is a late start for me. It's 10-1. I got a toddler's going to be up in about 5.5 hours. But you know what? 5-hour energy, myself, this DDP, we will thrive on. Now, other guys, I think deserve the nightcap, the tip of the cap, kind of nightcap. What a game. Obviously, tip the cap, nightcap to Kingston Flemings, Chris Cenac, getting their flowers early. I thought JoJo Tugler in the second half, though, right? So JoJo Tugler, right? Only buck of the first half was the final seconds. I then think you go from that to open the second half where he has 6 straight points, big time block on the chase down on the Abdullah Ahmed kid. I think a couple like other great defensive rebounds. He forced a couple fouls on Keita going after rebound. I mean, he had, I thought, a spectacular when he was able to play second half. I also think his fifth foul was total bogus. I thought the kid not only traveled but ran into him. Whatever. He in a game that JoJo Tugler fouled out, there's only one call he had where I'm like, JoJo, you shouldn't be doing that, man. Some of that's just we're going to play physical basketball on the road. It was a tightly called game and all that. Anyway, I thought JoJo played really, really well tonight. I thought in his absence, tip the cap, nightcap to Khalifa, Sacco. There was a stretch second half where I thought things get dicey. Houston was up, I think it was 2 or 4 points about the 5-minute mark. Sennac gets his fourth right after Tugler gets his fourth. They both go and sit down, right? And like in other stints that Sennac had set out, BYU had gone in their run. In this moment, the very next play, it's like a Sacco put back, Sacco block, Sacco rebound, kick out to a 3. Like it was like boom, 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 boom on a row. I was like, okay, he came to play. That's a 5th-year guy, a veteran. And I know he hadn't been at Houston all 5 years, but that's a guy that knows, like, okay, this is the moment where I got to do my job at the peak of my ability in this moment with like the utmost focus because I got like 3 minutes, right? And I thought Sakho maximized those stretches. He did only have 7 points. He played 16 minutes, but I thought like those moments were so big because it could have gone super haywire. Instead, the minutes I was worried about were the minutes that stretched the lead, right? And that was a big, big series and set for him. I got people laughing at me about wanting to make rivalries. I find one. I don't care which one you pick. Find one. 8 of the top 16 teams lost this week. Notably, Houston did not. But yes, there were. And frankly, for BYU, 16th, you took 2 losses. I mean, the top will be mixed up. I think Houston probably climbs a spot or 2, but we also know that they hate us in the AP poll. So whatever. This question, though, I do not answer this question. Houston will not stay in Utah to play the other Utah team on Tuesday. They did that with Arizona, I believe, last year and did not like getting off routine, right? Because part of the road trip routine is like very much just like a routine kind of feel. And so I think that they will be coming back. I believe I heard they will be coming back to Houston tonight or like maybe, I guess, technically the next morning. And then having about 48 hours, if that, maybe 36 hours before heading back to Utah because the travel routine, I think, is like a thing that they feel like is important. I also think for what it's worth that BYU is in Provo, and obviously U versus Utah in Salt Lake City. Those are 45 minutes apart, so it's not like super far. They do have their own airport there in Provo. And the same money that making BYU a big athletic program is also making that a big airport. So I think that's there too. And so I think that that's all to the program and the guys that want to do that. Houston wins this game, and we'll know more about the AP poll by Monday morning, and we'll know more about the impact of this on seedings and rankings. So as things go, I mean, got people talking about move up to the one line, or they might move up to the one line, right? I got I think I got a text in the Everydayer group about like, is Houston in the top 5 in the AP poll? And I didn't think that was a question that warranted this because that's a very concrete answer we'll get on Monday. I think that they should, but Bowling, I thought that they should have probably before tonight too. So we'll see how things go. I do think though that in the macro level of things, before we log off here and try and get some sleep before Tougler wakes me up in a minute, that I think that a really key moment for this team last year was winning, like obviously the Kansas game, the UCF game shortly before that, but just like finding their ways to win these games. And last year they were closer than this, but they were games like this where like, hey, it was dicey at about the 5-minute mark when you got 2 of your bigs in foul trouble and it's a 4-point game and you're on the road and they got a pro, if not 2, find a way to win. And the games, if anything, like people talk about comparing this year's team and last year's team. I think people are thinking about last year's team in April. If anything, this year's team is winning games by bigger margins against better competition in February, at least during the start of it. And so, like, I think the ceiling is getting to be like visible and is really, really high. The floor is low. This team has higher variance than last year's team for sure. They're also 21-2, and the Big 12 is very much in their grasp because if they beat Arizona, which I think they got a shot, we'll talk about that when we get there. They beat Arizona, then Arizona have one loss. Houston has the head-to-head. I mean, what else could you want? I don't want to be anyone else. I want to be us. I want to control our destiny like we do. Houston Cougars, man. Houston freaking Cougars, man. Locked on Cougars, Premier the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs. Go freaking Cougs.